Okay, so I believe others are still coming in, so we might as well try to start lang. I invite everybody for a short prayer before we begin. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Dear Lord, Heavenly Father, we ask for your divine grace and at the same time, Lord, provide thanksgiving as you have consistently and continuously been generous to us. May your abundance and love continue to sustain us, and may everything that we do, Lord, glorify you. This we pray through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
Saint John Baptist de La Salle,
Pray
pray
for
for
us
us, live Jesus in our hearts forever.
forever.
In the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. All right, so I do apologize if some of you, I've taken some of your time because you might have a date for 5:30 to 6:30. But uh, rather than just simply waiting for you to have your class by 6:30, you might as well have it now if you are available. So, but don't worry. For those who will not be available, just like what we had as a routine in the previous meeting, I will be able to upload this, and then they might, for their own convenience, try to navigate and check what was the lesson that we had just an hour ago kung hindi gid kasulod sa schedule. But again, this will all be dependent on whether or not we've reached a certain number. So far sa inyo, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 sa inyo. 7 out of 18 from your class. Sige lang. But nonetheless, pardon my enthusiasm to have the class because in all honesty, we are already behind um, in our coverage. So I might as well utilize this period for you to actually acquire something out of this dull or your moment nga gahulat lang kamo or yung iban sa inyo galantaw na Netflix lang. All right, sige. Um, okay, others are coming in, so very well. Okay, so welcoming those who were just who just logged in. I'm simply welcoming everybody because apparently our schedule is 6:30 pa to 7:30. But um, I foresee that in some instances we might begin early to accommodate everybody in the class, especially if there is like a group or a class activity. Okay, so but for today, I just really wanted to meet the class knowing that we are far behind, not just far behind, we are a little bit behind on our schedule for coverage. Okay, so just a recap of everything that we've had. We were discussing more or less, and an interesting topic coming from most of you is that you presented five facts about law. Okay, for some of you, it was just simply at random why you chose those facts. For others, for the sake of compliance. For others, you feel that it's important that you get to share those facts. Somewhat, maybe at the back of your mind, you might have been considering that I'd share this information because this information is something that is so rare, or this information is something that can really help. um, just basically what we want to achieve in this class. The objective of this class is for you to gain a particular affinity towards the study of law. But it's not just five facts. There's a lot of factual things that you need to accommodate and for you to absorb in the study of law. Sige. So, well, I was sharing some of the, ano na siya kanina, music while waiting. Okay, allow me to go to the reference material. So this is the introductory part wherein we were particularly discussing uh, the topics with respect to our subject matter. So in wait, okay. Sige, let me just try to. Okay, here we go. So again, if us as an individual are fond of buying something from Lazada, from Shopee, and all of that, and these gadgets, these tools are of use to you, you would refer these optimization of a particular thing through the manual that they have. So there's a machine's manual, there's a user's manual that is being provided there. So for us human beings, when we we were given birth, would there might have been no opportunity for us, or well, there might have been books already that are being placed to who have provided a depth of the study of the human soul, the human being. But in earlier times, um, in the discovery of man, and in the pursuit of knowledge and reason, knowledge was more or less condensed into a particular form. For others, it might have been through the Bible, but the author would greatly suggest that for man who is more of a complex being, I'm sorry, more complex than a machine, capable of feelings, emotions, strange enough that we have the concept of an eternal soul. How is it, and in what way can we optimize our existence? So he called the manual's instruction as the law. So kanami siya kung ibuta mo nga ang aton actually user's manual is with the law. Well, in a point of view, he is also addressing truthfulness. Why? Because the law, in its study in particular with the subjects that we have for civil law, it's dealing with from womb to tomb. From the time one is born, he is being provided with certain rights, vested with certain privileges, and protected by the very nature. And of course, until the different stages of one's life, up to the stage of his death. Morbid as it would sound, there are instances wherein even after your death, you are particularly still controversial. Remember, there are individuals who have accumulated and amassed so much wealth that its distribution is survived by the particular successors, or to those who would be considered as the legitimate heirs. So amuna, the law is somewhat being considered as our instructional manual. So in the study of law, we need to be grounded on the objectives and its faculty, which is the blessing of our human mind. So the human mind is composed of the intellect and the will. The objective of our intellect, ang aton nga kaalam, is to search for the truth. It's so cliche, it's so particularly gas-gas, but we're trying to deal with reason. And as previously stated, law is based on reason. Based on reason because it's grounded into our values, it's grounded into our human intellect. So our intellect searches for the truth, not just the biased truth, but the objective truth. And our will as individuals is aimed towards the existence of what is good in our life. So the intellect cannot rest till it has fully comprehend infinite truth. And our will never be satisfied if we have not fulfilled the infinite goodness. So grabe, ka-philosophical gid siya sang approach niya. But this is your foundation, intellect and will. Just like when some of you are deliberating, I would assume that some of you are in student government and in your part of the Senate or the legislature. The very principle that you would always espouse there is that there must be substance and form. Here, the law and in our human mind requires that we exercise our intellect for the infinite good and our will for infinite truth for our intellect and infinite good for our will. Okay? So kanami siya if we are just simply dealing with the concept of law under our human mind and human reason. So thus, that man, the purpose is to know God, to love Him, and to serve Him in His world and be happy with Him forever and ever. And this can be attained only by following the law. So, um, earlier we were trying to make definitions of the law. So the law is defined as the most generic sense. Again, the most generic sense. The last time, even if without looking at your book, the law are not surely, these are ideas and principles executed. Mula gid na, that's the generic sense of trying to define a law. Because we have categorized law as I mentioned last time, di ba? I even gave a more distinction with divine law to natural law and positive law. But the author is actually just simply having the dichotomy of natural law versus positive law. So that's just me trying to make an emphasis about divine law as not just a product of positive law, but it is actually a really higher category. But nonetheless, law is defined as the most generic sense that is uh, an ordinance of reason. Please take note, ordinance of reason, meaning it is a product of reason. It is promulgated for common good. By whom? By the person who is in charge. Okay? Three basic elements. Ordinance of reason, promulgated for the common good. Anong purpose niya? Sino nag-promulgate? By one who is in charge. One who has power. One who has been delegated or selected or have been fully clothed and authorized to be in charge. So, to be useful and fair, law has to be promulgated and made known to be expected for others as information that they will have to follow. So classifications according to their promulgation, this is the one that we're trying to formalize uh, our understanding. There is natural law and there is positive law. Natural law, they are promulgated impliedly in our conscience and in our body. Okay? Conscience in our body. Natural moral law. So it applies to a higher faculty, the good and the evil. To do good and to avoid evil. So the concept of right and wrong here applies. The law of nature or natural law, this applies to like the example I gave you. The law of gravity applies to both on the higher and lower faculties of our understanding. The pursuit of truth, that when I am going to release this ball pen, it will fall down. Is that the truth? There is truth to that. And in so doing, what reason or what body of principle will I be able to utilize by the sheer fact that I have observed truth? Will it be good for me or will it be beneficial for me? So something like that. Tama rin siyang pag-intindi sa mga philosophy students. Positive law, they are expressly and directly promulgated. So more or less, siguro ang reference nyo for natural law implied. They are there because it exists. Nobody needs to tell you that killing is evil. Okay? So, just like in the sense of mala inse and mala prohibita in criminal law, it is bad because it is inherently bad. That's mala inse. But when we say mala prohibita, it is bad because it is prohibited by law. That goes into the positive law na nga instance. So positive law, there's divine positive law such as the Ten Commandments. These are the proponents of which would be claimed that it came from a higher source and then it's being utilized. So it is expressly being pabalugid sa aton. Ang law of nature ya, it can be discovered by anyone. It can be discovered that the law, maybe the law on thermodynamics. Uh, who's familiar with the law on thermodynamics? Or even the law that a an object which is in vacuum. Okay, so mas tapos siguro sa yung inertia ay na ano nila sa an object will remain at rest until an external force is asserted to move it. Somebody does not necessarily need to inform and promulgate rules that exists because by mere observance and the use of our senses, we will be able to observe that an object that is remaining there will still be stoic in position and will be stagnant and will not move until an external force is being asserted for it. Okay? So, divine positive law, a divine human positive law. So, the divine human positive law, these are more or less the commandments that are being promulgated by a formal uh, group or religious group such as the Catholic Church. The commandments that are provided there, the different sacraments provided therein. So these items are intact. How about human positive law? Then this is where the study of law really is in progress. That's why I was telling you that in my categorization, mas hapos mo yung makategorize nga uh, divine law, natural law, human positive law. Because this is arranged according to, kay initial, this is being grouped according to promulgation. This is being grouped according to promulgation ang iyang pag-present. What I was telling you is this is based on the concept and adoption of law that we have. What is our understanding about the nature and the effects of law as it exists. So, understandably, this book will deal only with human positive law, and that only a portion thereof. So, two kinds of positive law are more particularly discussed. Iban sinada, it's in theology and theodicy. So, we go to human positive law. The very concern that I have for you here is that uh, this is our study of law would be centered with. So, in general, human positive law is a reasonable rule of action expressly or directly promulgated by competent human authority for the common good. Usually, but it's not necessary that there is a sanction in case of disobedience because it would be um, generalizing that in case of disobedience, there is a particular sanction. That usually comes into play when we are dealing with criminal law. May penalties are involved. There are natural consequences if you will not be able to follow something. So usually, but it's not necessary that there is a sanction involved. So Justice Bradley of the United States Supreme Court says law is a science of principles by which civil society is regulated and held together, by which right is enforced and wrong is detected and punished, which is actually just a same concept that they have. It has the same elements involved there. Same elements, same concept. The page speaks of law as the body of rules governing the conduct of person living in association with others under the guarantee of social compulsion. Dami man siya pag-define. Here, we have Sanchez Roman, which says this is usually what I standard ko na yung pag-define sinada. That law is a rule of conduct which is just and obligatory, promulgated by a legitimate authority and of common observance and benefit. That's it. That's my go-to definition because it encompasses everything. It's generic but it captures it. Others nga pag-define sila it guarantees social compulsion. Wow. I-explain mo pa kung anong meaning ng social compulsion. So, for the benefit of everybody, find your niche of how to define human positive law. Okay. But all of them, the commonality is these five things. Essential is a human positive law. The reason of the reasonable rule of action. There is a reasonable rule of action. Our actions are being ruled by a particular set of rules. There is due promulgation. Promulgation means it has to be made known. There has to also be a competent authority to where the source of this promulgation would come from. And generally, that's why it's generally the fourth one is a sanction imposed for disobedience. So these four elements usually have the only things that needs to be there. You can define it in whatever fancy word you would say, but the important part is that the gist of the idea is that you have these four elements there. So human positive law, how do you distinguish that from morality? While human positive law covers only external conduct, morality naman daw kuno, it involves the external and internal thoughts. So while human positive law, who is the enforcer for this? The enforcer for this is the state. The instrumentalities and the different agencies of the state will be the ones who will enforce the efficacy, the effectiveness of human positive law. But this is not the case for morality. Unless there are certain moral legislations that we have. Moral legislations, say for instance, a particular moral legislation that we have is prostitution. If we have a law that defines that what prostitution constitutes as an act, what constitutes the act of prostitution, and what is the penalty engaged to that, then basically it can be enforced by the state. But in certain contexts, morality is defined by the values of the greater society according to culture and according to social norms. Okay? So basis, what is the basis of human positive law? Positive law has for its basic premise the following: divine pronouncement, the natural moral nature of man, legislative enactment, jurisprudence, or judicial decisions, conventions or treaties, customs, and traditions. So these are hierarchies of what is the basis for human positive law. Kung baga, ang short term for natin, what are the sources of human positive law? Ang human positive law has particular sources. Diin gahalin nga gambal ka nga there is a rule of conduct which should be just and obligatory. It can be from divine pronouncements such as pronouncements by the crown, the king, the pharaoh, the emperor. They are the basis of what should be the law. The natural moral nature of man. There might be no particular law that has been promulgated, but on the very nature that man needs to live with a dignified life, sige. Then we have the particular ones, the ones that there are really deliberations and enactments through the legislative powers, through the legislation. Then we have jurisprudence. Again, jurisprudence, the other term is like the judicial decisions. Judicial decisions that form part of the law of the land. Conventions or treaties, even customs and traditions. What are our general customs? And so these are some of the things of which human positive law is based upon, or these are the sources of human positive law. Here, we discuss the concept of what is derecho and ley. So in some of us being aware that we have been a product of a 331 years of colonized, we're a colony of the superpower that was Spain. Okay. So most of our, kung butangta ang genealogy sang aton nga laws, they come from Spanish laws. Philippine laws generally have been thoroughly and widely influenced by Spanish law because we have been a colony of Spain. And Spain, the influence of Spain would come from Europe, the European concepts that it has organized the different laws. So from Philippine laws, Spanish law, European law. The Great Wide European Law, backtrack ta sa timeline, sige-sige gid. The greatest influence that they have still exists as we've discussed previously under Roman law. Derecho. What is derecho? It's the abstract science of law. But for us, we have bastardized the term derecho. Kaya kung na siya mag-inaway, kamusang imong kilala, hindi gid siya magpasugot sa imuon niya. Tiyambalo mo, diretso mo na. For us, ang diretso is straight. Path mo na. But in terms, ang diretso is the cause, the very cause of what and why actions are being done. Anong cost sang layi? Lain pag ng layi gali. Ang layi is amuning lay, the specific law. The note here is student of law studies specific laws. So law is the general type. I'm sorry, derecho, which is law of the general type, whereas specific ones would be the layes or laye. Sa aton, di ba, kung mag-Ilonggo, tanada, may layita, ang laye sa pag-intindi. That's the law. But in full concept, mabatian nyo ng mga tigulang, mga katigulangan, or even into the news and interactions that you had. Anong layita? Meaning, what is the particular law that governs that conduct? What is the particular law that actually defines this very nature? All right. So we move to the classifications of human positive law. According to whether a right is given or it is merely a procedure of enforcement. Human positive law is categorized into two: substantive law or remedial law. Or others would say it's adjective law or procedural law. Pareho lang nagyapon, remedyo man nagyapon. So substantive law, the very essence of substance is that it establishes rights and duties. Amo lang ginagawa niyo. Substantive law. Ano gani substantive law? Nalipat na ko sa substantive law. Ang substantive law is, do you have the right at the very first instance? Do you have that duty recognized and in being provided to you or being considered as entitled for you to have? Because if not, then there's nothing to speak about procedure. Substantive law is a prerequisite. kung sabaga sa mga lecturers pa maghambal, ano ang i-process mo kung from the very start wala ka sang inog process? So, substantive law is the right that you have. Ging violate ang akon nga right. What is my right? Say for instance, my right to own a particular thing. My right to property. My right for me to acquire property. So, you have that property. Somebody took your property from you. Maybe your classmate. It might be somebody else. It might be a snatcher. Nadakpan ang snatcher. How would you enforce your right? How would you correct the wrong that was given to you? That is where procedural law comes in. Usually, this is the manner of how you enforce your legal rights and claim. How? You particularly report them to the law enforcement unit. The law enforcement unit goes to the prosecutor. The prosecutor then identifies whether there is probable cause. After identifying it when there's probable cause, it files the case to the courts. Then the courts will generally hear and say whether there are things that have been done or not done or what else to be do so that we can legally enforce your right. So these are the very classifications for human positive law according to whether you have a right and you have a means to enforce that right. Okay? Substantive law and remedial law or substantive law or procedural law, these are elements of which the interplay of rights. Okay? According to the scope and content of the law. Now, the scope might be a private law or might be a public law, scope or content. When we say private law, when we say private law, it regulates the relations between members of the community and with one another. Say for instance, civil law. It's a private law because you're gonna deal and enter into a contract with someone. Pedro enters into a contract with Maria. What is the nature of the contract? The nature of the contract is that Pedro will consider himself and accept his role as husband, whereas Maria will accept her role as the wife of Pedro. Okay. So that is the special relation that is existing between the two of them as husband and wife. But again, if we will go through family code, you would know that marriage is a special contract of permanent union. So it is elevated to a higher standard or a higher level of which para lang sa kapalihugan sang tanan, the basis of which is only the private parties are involved. So that's why the scope are only individuals there. What about public law? When we're speaking about public law, it governs the relations between an individual with the state, with the ruler, with the particular person in authority or to the community as a whole. Nan, public law meaning ang scope niya hindi lang individual to another individual, kundi sa kabilugan, sa tanan, kag sa bilugan, kabilugan. Again, when we're discussing political law defines the relationship between a citizen and the state. Alam nga naman lang nga kamo lang, ikaw lang kagang state lang ang maapektuhan. Because the state has a lot of branches, has a lot of agencies, has a lot of instrumentalities. It even has its own local legislative or local government units. Oh. So these are more or less, scope niya is as wide as many people would be reaching. Whereas in private law, kamo lang niya nga parties ang naapektuhan si Dada. That's why in instances about bigamy, in instances about adultery, only the aggrieved party is the one who can file a case. In private law na siya ha. That's why, kumbaga, exclusivity. Public law ya, anyone who is offended by that act of yours can actually file a case against you. Oh, say for instance, nagbugtaw ka, nalipat ka nga, nagwa ka sa balay nyo, gauba ka gali, naskandalo ang imo nga mga neighbors. Ti, hindi siya kambal nga, ay, ako lang niya makafile kay ako lang niya ang naguba. No. Or ikaw lang kilala. When the when the sense of social norm or uh, naapektuhan ang sense of morality and decency of the public, then generally they can file the felony against you. Alright. So according naman niya sa force and effect. Force and effect, what kind of laws do we have? We have mandatory and we also have permissive. As to the force and effect ha, mandatory or permissive. Permissive is not just the one part. It can also be the the idea that you are deviating from the individual's desire. So those that may deviate. So pwede ka, allowed ka. But in mandatory or prohibitive laws, compliance is a must. They are expressed as public policy and the disobedience is punished either by what? Considering an act or the contract void. Such as, for instance, mandatory or prohibitive, anay. Prohibitive. If Pedro marries Juan, si Pedro nagpakasal kay Juan. But in our laws, it is strictly provided that marriage should be from between a man and a woman. The effect would be that the contract or the marriage that they entered, no matter how they say na amo niya kontratahanay, this is just going to be considered as a mere scrap of paper by the state because that contract is considered as void. That marriage is void. But there are instances that can be considered as pwede. There are laws or instances such as hidden treasures. The finder gets 50% of the owner of the land which it has found. However, by agreement, the portion can be changed. This is under the law of property. Usually, the whole context is that um, permissive or suppletory, you deviate from the general rule. The general rule is that whoever owns the land, anything that is being found within that land is considered to belong to the owner of the land. Muna siya ang the rule. Pero ginaalaw nga kung hidden siya nga treasure and he finds it by chance. Actually, the definition there is that he finds it by chance. Then he is allowed to retain 50% of that item that he has. So the idea again is to the force and effect of the law. Mandatory, it is absolute, imperative, or prohibitory laws, meaning the act would be constituting as a violation if it is being committed. Okay. So we go to civil law. Civil law is the more particular subject that we're gonna deal with because persons and family relations fall under the category under civil law. So civil law is that branch of law which generally treats of the personal and family relations of an individual. Either it deals with his property, his successional rights, and the effects of his obligations and contracts. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the particular books that you find under civil law. The first book is the Law on Persons and Family Relations. That's book 1. kapoy. Para di sa side ko ang mga book. Anyways, ano siya? Uh, so book 1 is where you can find the laws, nakahadula siya. The laws pertaining to persons and family relations. That's just for civil law. Now, if you get to finish that, when you go through second semester of your first year in law school, you get to have a subject known as property law. That's book 2. Book 2. Wait. Ayan. So book 2, you're gonna deal with what are properties. What are the distinctions of properties? So you have their real property, personal property, how do you transmit, how do you donate? Okay, those are things that which it will be considered there. Book 3, your successional rights, meaning to say your inheritance, ladies and gentlemen, when your ascendants or whoever it is in your genealogy, nga mga lolo nyo manada, or even your parents, mind you, there is an imposition of the law that they cannot just leave behind or they cannot just dispose of their property without reserving first the property that they will leave behind to their legitimate heirs. And that's called a legitim. Okay. I'm just giving you an overview so that you would be able to understand the concept. Okay. And then book 4 deals with obligations on contracts. Oblicon. So una sa amon, book 1 is per fam, per fam. Book 2 is props, property. Book 3 is successions. And book 4 is obligations and contract. Imagine that, okay, you're gonna invest in your books. So book 4 is, wait, wait, basta book 4 is your obligations and contracts. My gosh, mga notes ko pa sa una. Okay, so in dealing with that, you're trying to state what are, how do you define a person's obligation? How do you impose upon him that binding effect of his actions? Okay? And how does one enter into contracts? Contracts of which it produces effects. So, usually, ang pinaka-short definition, di ba, ng contract is it is the meeting of the minds, meaning that both parties has agreed as to the contract price, as to the object, as to the consideration, and they have provided within the terms of their agreement. And mind you, it's not just ending on book 4. May ara pa ya, mas damol, book 5. Okay, children. So, amat-amat nyo na ni basahon kung I'm not discouraging you from taking up law. I'm just giving you the reality that there's a lot of reading material for you to read. 7 years, kaya nyo ni basahon ah. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's just the subject of civil law. That's just the subject of civil law. Ang daming civil law. Hindi may taon. Nakadamol. Sakon nyo na. Special contracts ang book 5. So, there's another definition of civil law. These are masses of precepts, meaning these are wide concepts that determine and regulate the relations such as assistance, authority, obedience. This is among members of the family. This is among those who exist within the members of society in dealing with their private interest. So, Actually, I prefer the first definition because it's just going to give you the general, or you're just dissecting the contents of civil law. So the word civil comes from the word civilis, jus civilis. If you're familiar with your Roman law, jus civilis are the laws of the civilized. Um, why is it that even until now Roman law has been adopted and really has been promulgated in its reverence to its application? Because they have been considered to be fair, they have been considered to be, in a manner of speaking, the very idea and nature of the rights being created are really much practical, minus the fact that there were a lot of prominent philosophers who have clearly provided an exhaustive thinking of how rights should be respected, what should be the entitlement of a Roman citizen compared to those who are non-Romans. That's why, remember sila, when in Rome, do what the Romans do. Okay. So that's the general concept for it. Okay. So it is the word civilis is a citizen as distinguished from a savage or a barbarian. So originally, the word pertained to a member of the civitas or a free political community. Wow. So let's deal with civil law and distinguish it from political law. An overview, as mentioned the last time, is that civil law governs the relations between who? Community with one another, or individual to another individual, or to a group of individuals. Political law, people, and the government. So, importante gid nga sa to nga may relationship. Okay? It doesn't have to be a intimate relationship. It just simply has to be a relationship that affects the act of the other and affects one from the other end. That's why in a political spectrum, ang ginanamihan ko when we're dealing with uh, ano na siya, European political theories. Magstoryahan na itagani ang spectrum of, kabalo ka mo na sang mag-concept sang left kag right, di ba? Are you still there? Sorry, basibalan na disconnect ko. Ako lang sige gawakal eh.
Yes, sir. Ano pa man?
Ako ka
Yes,
mo?
sir.
Sorry, kid. Wala gid ko ka pamangkot-pangkot sa inyo. This is your time to share. Okay. Do you know the concept of the leftist group and the rightist group? We're talking about political concepts in political law. Who has the idea? Anong leftist, ano ang rightist? Anyone? Anyone who would like to share? Kaya doon na ubos, doon na exhaust mo ko ba? Sige, more? Anyone? Anyone? Sige. Anyone? Anyone? Where you're there? Concept? Patricia, what's your understanding about a leftist versus a rightist? Left wing from right wing. Oh,
What I understand, attorney, is this the general where they are opposing towards each other and they have different ideologies.
hmm. So, yes, go ahead.
Um, I think that's it,
That's a
attorney.
mula
I
na.
don't. I am not really knowledgeable about the
All right, that's
specific
okay.
ideologies.
Okay,
Oh,
that's okay. Here's an opportunity for you to learn. Sige, Hannah, can you, Hannah,
Sir, so basically, leftists, they are supporters of left-wing ideology,
what
in
is,
which they advocate equality, egalitarianism, and such. However, the right wing ideology, they are more on conservatism. So, such as in the case of the US, leftist group or the rightist or leftist group is labeled as, in the case of Trump,
Right is it Trump or left is it Trump?
rightist because he's a Republican.
Okay.
Republicans are conservatives.
Okay.
That's also.
Sige, thank you. Can we have Shara? Sige, go Shar. Thank you.
Sir, attorney, good afternoon. I think, attorney, the leftists are those who are liberal or like they tend to adapt to the current, kung ano, the current, like, what is just basar sa ina nga event basar or ina nga pamalakad, and the right wing sir amo na silang conservative. I agree with Hannah, and they are more on ano sir order and authority sir, and they tend to base on hierarchy and tradition.
Alright, sige. Stacy, go.
I have actually a question, sir. Attorney, actually have a question instead. Um, is it okay to ask na lang?
Sige, go.
Okay.
Can
So,
you,
in politics, diba, attorney, there is left wing and right wing, which are the liberals and the conservatives, usually. I don't know about the case in the Philippines, but how about people that doesn't really, lean towards anything? For example, centrists, right? So they say that not choosing, quote unquote, not choosing a side is not part of politics. It's not right. So what do they mean about that, attorney? Like I heard that from.
alright, sige. So, wala naman may dugang, no? So, just to address that, Hannah, do you want to add something pa? Wala na. Still raising your hand. So, wala naman.
I am so sorry, sir. I was
Okay.
able to.
Okay lang, okay lang. So, here. Na, you're right in your context kasi we're talking about the political side, di ba? The relationship between the people and the state. Okay. So, um, what is the left and what is the right? So you're right in the context that the leftists are those individuals that are prone to the liberal side and the right is prone to the conservative side. But what are they conservative about and what are they liberal about? Okay. Here, this is where the balance of things needs to be sorted. Again, your study of political science is about power. We are going to have a CISO. Kung CISO siya, ano siya namin ngayon, CISO. O, CISO. So, CISO, which is, here sa tunga, is the balance of power. Meaning to say, the rightist is the government and its authority to assert that it has all the power to maintain and preserve the existence of the state and even the conservative of the preservation of the state. The other side naman niya, this is how political theorists would state, that on the leftist side naman niya, that government or the state should limit its power so that people, the citizens, can enjoy the freedoms of civil liberties, civil rights, and all the things that are blessings of a democratic or a republican state. So, in hindsight, there are what we call leftists and rightists. There are also what we call the extreme left and to the extreme right. The extreme right are those authoritarian types of government to which they would assert that for the state to exist, limited rights or enough rights are just given to individuals. And the rule of power through military force is the one that should exist by the same set and reason that the extreme right would always want to dominate those that they are governing. Extreme left naman niya would claim that we have rights and the power belongs to the people, not the government. Okay? And on the extreme left, they would claim that government need not really exist because everything can be governed together and by communion. So that's the communism part of the extreme left. Okay, that's just one of the concept for the discussion. At least I know, I hope you understand that the balance of the relationship that exists is for the balance of power. Power to govern, power to rule, power to exist, the power for the state, and the respective rights of the citizens. So that is mainly how you are trying to balance both ends of the site. Okay, I hope that's clear for you. The Philippines, well, the Philippines is very much a ano ni siya, a unique strand of leftist and rightist because there's a season that they are leftist, there's also a season that we are rightist. So it depends on the very nature of who sits in the administration. Okay. All right. So I hope that adds up to your knowledge as to understanding who are leftist and rightist in your group. And what are they left about, what they are right about. Okay. All right. So, civil law distinguished from the civil code. Okay, please note that the civil law are the laws that are found in the civil code. Okay? So the civil code is not only the place where you can find civil laws because we have different laws scattered not just in the civil code. So kung butang ta, damo ka notes, gin-compile mo lang ang notes mo sa ina nga particular nga subject. Okay? So kung may papel ka da nga gingamit mo sang discussion ta sang first meeting, may papel ka subong nga gingamit sang discussion ta subong, may papel ka sa mga succeeding nga mga times na ta, ging-compile mo lang sila, ging-codify mo lang sila, meaning you arrange them through different books, titles, articles, sections, provisions. That is a code. Okay? So there's a code for the civil laws. Ang civil law is the distinct subject, the content or the substance that is enshrined as what you have written or what you have provided in the notes that you have kung ano na siyang subject. So, civil code is again the compilation of existing laws that we have. They have been specifically arranged to books, titles, chapters, subheads promulgated by the legitimate authority. Okay, we have civil code. Ano pang mga code nga today? We have a water code. Tanan nga mga existing nga mga laws about relating to water and use of water, king-codify siya. Anything a subject, it's not naturally, the code is just a nature of a form that we have. So codification, kumbaga, is necessary to provide simplicity, order, and reform in legislation. Meaning you need not look anywhere else, it's just there. So from time to time, there are additional civil rights that are actually being created. There are different presidential decrees, executive orders, and other means to which for the benefit of members of the society. Here, the example is like the Child and Youth Welfare Code. It's not found in the Civil Code because this was promulgated on a later part. So, doesn't mean that it's not forming part of our civil laws. All right? Okay, okay. Sige. So, a lot of this coming from example. All right. So, for our next meeting, we'll not meet on Friday because for your mental health, you need to at least unwind kuno. Okay? Your assignment would be to read Articles 1 to Article 10. Okay? Article 1 to Article 10. Read it. I may, I may, yeah, mapanagin na. I may invoke an announcement that maybe within the middle of our discussion, you would perform an activity in your canvas. Let's say, all right, it's now, we start our class like 6:30 kunwari. It's now 7 o'clock. I'm giving you 15 minutes to answer activity quiz 1 on your canvas. 15 minutes. The content or the subject there are with respect to Article 1 to Article 10. Okay? That's usually how I try to force you or challenge you to really study the subject or really study your assignment. Okay? Is there no other question as we end and conduct? Yes, Shara.
Sir, may question ko, sir, sa scope bala, sir, raw.
Mm-hmm.
Di ba, sir, ang DepEd private ay public agency, sir? Ay, attorney?
Ang ano, scope?
DepEd. Basta ang DepEd, attorney, is that a public
Public.
agency?
Oh, yes. Why?
Kay once, sir, attorney, we had witnessed a case na it is between attorney, private person and the DepEd, wherein the the DepEd attorney nagpatindog sila school sa sa private property sang ina nga person. And gusto ko lang mabalancer kung ano ng scope ya, private or public. Kay
Well,
between
okay. You know that when it involves entities that are not anymore a private individual, it actually loses the nature of a private law. Because again, when you're dealing with property, the property involved there, it may affect not just another group, but affects this instrumentality of government. Therefore, this is no longer just a private matter. Because number one, when DepEd entered that property and kumbaga try niya occupy na or try niya acquire ng nga property, it is acting so under the premise and authority that it is intended for public use. Diba? Remember your political law 101. Um, in in the enforcement of your inherent right of taxation or in any other inherent right that you have, when you have public use, then it becomes public issue. Ano ganing three inherent rights of the state? Basi nalipat na kamo. Sino maka-remember? Review lang niya. Can you remember? The three inherent rights of the state. Meaning, if a state exists, may rights ni siya nga ginaposes. Ini nga rights, maski wala na siya nakasulat, ara na siya dapat nga power, ara na siya dapat ga-exist. So what do you call them? I already mentioned.
Attorney,
Ano?
legislative, judicial, and executive.
Those are branches, okay? Thank you for the effort. But these are branches of our government. I'm talking about inherent power of the state. The inherent power of the state, as I mentioned, these are powers that exist if a state exists also. So the first clue I gave you is the power of taxation. So a state cannot survive. Yes, Stacy, can you give me the rest?
Uh, try lang. Okay. Power of taxation, I think police power and eminent domain.
These are the inherent powers of the state, meaning to say that the state can validly exercise them by the reason that as it exists, it needs sustenance. That's why it needs to tax the people. Okay? Kwa siya kwarta. Now, as it exists, it's going to promulgate laws. As it promulgate laws, how will he be able to ensure that everybody is obeying? So he needs to have a police power to enforce it. And then the third one is what I was referring to you, the eminent domain, which is the right of the state to reacquire property for public use. Okay. So just to answer in short the question earlier about the DepEd trying to occupy a property in private, that's considered as a public law concern. Okay? Because it includes, say for instance, a uh, political law, a relationship between the individual and the state. Oh, look at ito. Includes political law. Political law, relationship between the people and the state. Alright? Sige. That's just short. Any other question? Wala na ta? So that you can rest, enjoy your mental health. You can start reading already. Yeah, yeah. After this, you can start browsing and reading Articles 1 to Article 10.
Sir,
Yes, Hannah.
I just want to clarify something, sir, regarding to the private law
Mm,
between a wife and a husband.
mm.
So, since it's a private law, can a third party file adultery between the two? So it's either of the two, or it must be only the wife or the husband who can do that.
It's only the wife or the husband. Amo na yun. Um, in criminal law, the offended party and there is an offended party and there is the guilty party. Okay? So, the guilty party is the one that is being sued because he has violated something. I'm not yet designating whether lalaki siya or babae siya ha. Okay? What felony were you trying to invoke gani kaginahana? Adultery?
If a, yes, sir, if a third party
Alright.
is
So
able to file
what is your understanding about adultery?
extramarital relationship.
Okay. So in general and without particularly defining it according to the definition under the law, uh, an adulterous relationship or adultery is one being committed by a husband or by the wife. Is that correct? Husband or the wife?
Yes, sir.
No, wala pa. Ginapamangkot ko pa lang na. Because the particular um, yeah, to galing man. Because the particular felony for na adulterous really adultery is that you are the offended party is the only one who is being aggrieved here. So siya lang, kay yeah, yeah. Ang ako lang so, sorry to emphasize, so to cut it short, kay damo gyud ko be premises pa. To cut it short, it's only the offended party who can file against the other. A third party has nothing, has no right and has no legal standing to file it against the other. But in instances, the other party may be a co-defendant in this case. Okay? Meaning that other third party or the mistress or the paramour would be considered as one of those individuals who will be filed a case about it. Okay? Sige. So, it actually is interesting for you to understand procedure in a sense na when you are dealing with private offenses, nga paski lolo mo, tatay mo, utod mo, suya sila sa ginghimo sang bana mo, hindi na sila ya pwede maka-file case in behalf of you because this is a private affair. Kung baga, it is an offense committed against you and nobody else. Right?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Sige lang, we'll discuss more of that. This is just a premise man lang nga ginanata. Kay, of course, not everybody, well, that's this discussion in advance. All right? Any other question? Ladies and gentlemen, Polsai people, may pamangkot pa?
Attorney,
Sige.
mhm. Attorney, regarding about the quiz, it will be open during the discussion na kung open. Let's say you will announce around 7 and then 15 minutes to answer. It will be open
That's just an
during the time.
example, Miss Mirabeles. That's just an example. I'm not, I reserve, I reserve, I reserve, I reserve the particular announcement whether I will provide or I will not provide a quiz. Depende na siya sa flow ng discussion. Ha? So that's just an example I'm
Okay.
usually stating. Okay. But it really pays and it's really good if you're gonna study ahead, regardless whether there's gonna be a quiz or not. It means that you are simply studying well. Okay? Ano pa? Wala na. Wala na. Alright, sige. So with this, I thank you for your time. I hope that in the span of an hour and 10 minutes, you're able to acquire something. And I really hope that you read ahead because in all of this, there is no substitute for reading. Okay? So with that, we end this day. We call it a day. Live Jesus in our hearts.
Forever.
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 You can go.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you,
Thank you,
attorney.
sir.
Attorney.
Thank you, attorney.